I believed the idea that I was a woman in a man's body, and the only way to lead a successfully fulfilling life is to be honest with them and tell them all these things. So I told them everything. I told them all my traumas. I told them how I felt and everything about sexuality, and all that was used to reinforce the trans identity. Not only that, but after surgery, I regretted it instantly.
I'm just wondering, for the benefit of our audience, to start off with, could you describe your journey of transitioning and what ultimately just led you to decide that you wanted to detransition?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I had a lot of mental health issues by the time I was in my mid-20s, and I found the concept of gender dysphoria, which aligned very neatly with my experience as somebody who was gay. And even I just couldn't accept the fact I was gay. I hated the fact that I was attracted to males, and I wanted to do anything to get out of it. And by my mid-20s, there was just this huge online community. It kind of impacted a lot of the LGBT discourse at 2014, and by that point, it was just a free offering to somebody who had a great deal of mental health problems. And I don't think people understand just how powerful and how if you're in deep distress and somebody says to you, have this, you can be someone else, you can be a wonderful person who's celebrated, and not only that, but adored, and you do get that. And you come into this community, everyone tells you all these things that somebody with no self-esteem hasn't heard before in a lot of years, and all of a sudden you're only getting positive feedback all the time, no matter what it is, positive. It doesn't matter what pictures you were sharing, like, it didn't matter how, if you didn't look like a woman at all, they would still tell you how beautiful you were. And it's not just that online community. You go into like the gender clinic, which is what I did. I found that, and I found this option to transition, and I went through very intensive therapy, and it's my story is quite a long one, but basically I entered the gender clinic in 2015, and the first question that asked is if I wanted surgery, genital surgery, and at that point I never thought about it, so I kept putting it off and refusing it. But I was also getting a lot of therapy with them too, and over time with that, the community and this underlying belief, which was, I'm not gay, I'm a heterosexual woman, I'm just in the wrong body, and I've got a medical condition. And I thoroughly believed that. I thoroughly believed the reason that I was attracted to males, and the reason I had such a terrible time like growing up with my mental health, was because I was quite literally had a physiological condition in my brain where this was the only option. And obviously that got pursued. Me hesitation around surgery wasn't really properly addressed, but also I wasn't a very well person at that time. And I said in the conference earlier about this underestimation of how powerful these hormones are. And I was on an anti-androgen called goserelin, and I was also on the estradiol too, and those together just feel like a really bad concoction. And eventually I went through with the genital surgery in 2018, and I pretty much regretted it instantly. I shouldn't have done it. It shouldn't have, like, the amount of times I refused it should have been signal enough to leave us alone on that one. And obviously I'm no longer taking the anti-androgen because I don't have any gonads anymore. And I just felt like this crushing realization of clarity come. Everything was so clear after, but not before. And I really do think the anti-androgen had a big part to play in that thinking. And there's nothing rudely welcomes you to reality as strong as having your genitals removed. It just doesn't. It destroys your life in various different ways. And I know some people say how great it is and how wonderful their life is, and that's superb, and I'm glad that happened for them. But there are many people like me who shouldn't have even went down that path, who are simply gay. And when they brought that up, like as I did with this intensive therapy, all of these things that could be attributed to hating myself for being a gay guy growing up was attributed to internalized transphobia. So I hated the fact that I was trans, apparently, rather than gay. And it was just like, there was no victory, no winning. And I was very upfront about my mental health issues and everything, because I believed the idea that I was a woman in a man's body, and the only way to lead a successfully fulfilling life is to be honest with them and tell them all these things. So I told them everything. I told them all my traumas. I told them how I felt and everything about sexuality, and all that was used to reinforce the trans identity. Not only that, but after surgery, I regretted it instantly, and I resumed my gender clinic sessions with a gender therapist about 3 months after, when I was able to physically get there, and I brought up regret. And the first thing they said was, "You don't have regret, you've got OCD." And then I kept bringing it back up, and they're like, "Oh, it's clear your OCD is really bad. We'll need to get you a new diagnosis." So I got referred to a mental health team, who then said I wasn't expressing regret. I had a rumination, an obsessive rumination about going through surgery, and I also had unstable personality disorder, brand new diagnosis, because I experienced regret. So you're not even allowed to say this was wrong, this was a mistake. What happens is they're like, "Nope, there's a diagnosis for that." And it's just like, when that happens, and they just kind of I got ejected after that, a couple of years after surgery, even though I was like really struggling, and I was just like, what the hell? What's going on here? So I turned to my own community, anonymously online, because I dare not raise this with friends. No one wants to talk about the bad stuff in person. And at first it was okay, and there was some empathy and sympathy in that community, but I also found there was a lot of silence, and this line kept coming up again and again and again. Be careful who you tell. You don't know how this story will be misused. So it was all about management. It was all about managing my regret, rather than saying, actually, there are people who go down this path who maybe shouldn't have went all the way down or whatever. And that was enough for me to be like, this. I'm sorry for this one. I was like, enough for me to be like, this is it. This is too much for me. I can't possibly continue this. And then from that reality waking up, you kind of start doing the work that you should have done, realizing that actually that was nothing to do with being trans. That was to do with being gay. And there was a lot of threads like that after. And I was like, ultimately, when that thought started seeping in, I woke up and I was thinking, I can't do this anymore. I can't physically do it. I was putting on a walk and a voice, and I was suppressing personal beliefs and exchanging them for beliefs I didn't have, and I found like I was becoming a different person, and it wasn't me, it was someone else. And I was like, well, to be honest, to be me, I need to be real, and I need to be honest about my sex, I need to be honest about my body. And that was the gateway back to what I would call objective truth, of realizing physically, actually, I'm still male. That never changed, and I was never changing into a woman. I was just turning into a castrated, neutered male. And that's essentially what happened to me.
So something you said there, which I found really interesting, was about your refusal to accept truths about your sexuality early on. And as an outsider looking in, I hope you don't take any offense to this, but it seems like a big part of the transgender movement seems to be acceptance, and we need to be accepted for this. But it seems like at the most fundamental level, the whole concept of transgenderism is not accepting yourself. It's about rejecting things, your own biology, your own body. And so it seems like there's almost a contradiction there. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I absolutely agree with it. I think it's transitioning has a very similar pipeline to people who are born again Christians. Like, all their previous sins are now forgotten. It's a different life. It doesn't matter what you did. It doesn't matter who you are. You're trans now. And that's all that matters. Which is why there is a real problem within the trans community of them calling out really bad behaviour. They're not very good at it, because no trans can do no harm. Ultimately, there's always, even if it comes down to the act of a trans person taking their own life, that's not them who did it. It was the homicide of the political narrative that killed that trans person, not them. So there's a lot of stuff about responsibility. And as you said before, it is all about non-acceptance, because you're not accepting you're becoming someone else. And if you dared raise that subject to that individual who said, I am my true self, and it was like, who were you before then? From birth? Were you born untrue? Is that what you're saying? It took all those years to be true?
Final word, would you have any advice to somebody who's watching this who's maybe struggling with their gender identity the way you were when you were younger?
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you do, don't get surgery. Don't care how bad you think it is. Never ever get surgery. The lying to you about the success rate, the lying to you about the regret rate. Let's go over a few things very quickly. So for women who get mastectomies, you're going to be dealing with possibly scar chest. That it might not be a good job in the end of it. You're going to be dealing with absolute numbness. For males who have what I had, which was a penile version with scrotal graft, you can't produce your own testosterone anymore. You can't produce your own hormones, basically, and that has a knock-on effect to your autoimmunity, your endocrine system, your overall health. It shortens your life. Hormones are one thing, but surgery is a whole different bag. Don't do it. I'm going to be the person who's going to tell you not to do it. I'm not going to say go off and make your own decision. I'm going to tell you now, do not have surgery. Do not do it.